Hello, my name is Samantha Gibson, and I'm an AmeriCorps Vista worker at Health Commons. Could you please introduce yourself for the recording?
Hello, I'm June Sand.
Can you volunteer?
I'm a volunteer at the Health Commons at Central Lutheran Church and also a member of the congregation, and I'm a nurse, a registered nurse.
Thank you for joining me today in the Oral History Project. Before we begin, I would just like to confirm that you consent to being interviewed and having that interview recording stored at Augsburg University, where it will be made available to the public.
I do.
I just want to make a side note also about the noise here. We're doing this interview at Health Commons, so if there's some background noise, that would be why. To get us started, could you tell me a little bit about yourself, like where you grew up and who you called family?
I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa. My father and my mother and my brother. My father was a hospital chaplain at Iowa Methodist Hospital, a Methodist pastor. My mom was a retired school teacher, and she stayed home with my brother and I, and we grew up there, went to grade school, junior high, and high school. I was there till I went to college.
What led you to want to be a nurse?
I cannot remember a day I did not want to be a nurse. I think because I tag-teamed my father around the hospital all the time. It was very familiar territory to me, and had my own little doll hospital when I was little, and in high school and college worked at Iowa Methodist Hospital and Surgery. So something I've always thought would be the right spot for me.
You mentioned college. Can you tell me a little bit about your educational background?
Yes, I went to St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota, in their 4-year nursing program. We spent a year and a half on campus and the rest of our time up here in the Twin Cities working at Fairview Southdale and the Veterans Hospital.
And so how did you come to start working or volunteering at the Health Commons?
Well, my husband grew up at Central Lutheran Church. He has been a member there since he was 3, and when he and I started going there back in the latter or early 2000s, I needed to find my spot in the community there, and went downstairs and found out about the Health Commons, and Bev Nielsen was running it at the time. She was a professor from Augsburg College, and at the time she hadn't used any volunteers from church in that department. And so I gave her my name and address and told her I would be more than willing to help, and she said she'd think about it. And the next thing I knew, I had a phone call from her saying that she needed some vacation time. Would I take over? At that point, we were doing Sunday services from the Health Commons as well as during the week. And so I would help her when she needed someone to take over and be responsible for that Health Commons. And it's just grown from there. I've been there ever since.
What were some of your initial impressions?
Some of my initial impressions were that this was a wonderful way to be able to serve the community, that people from the community were coming in for help and aid and receiving it in a number of ways from the Restoration Center, and that the Health Commons was extremely important first introduction to healthcare in the Twin Cities.
And when was it that you began volunteering?
2001.
What do you remember about the beginnings of the Health Commons?
It was a little different. In the beginning, we didn't have any money. It was a reciprocal agreement, as I recall, between the church and Augsburg College. The church provided the space, the electricity, the heat, and then in return, Augsburg College provided a professor and students who came over to work with people. That it was to be a nursing center specifically, and that it came from a nursing perspective, not a medical perspective. And we would go around and recruit people to help us get travel items from people, or white socks. If we handed out hygiene items, as people came into the clinical area, they were more apt to come in and begin to know us and then sit down and speak with us. For a lot of people, it was off-putting medical care. They were concerned because it represented the government and the control of who they were, or following them, like with vaccines or mammograms or regular health care. So they tended to skirt away from that. And so that's where it was in the beginning, much smaller, a lot less people. And as time has gone along now, over the last 18 years, grown tremendously in the number of people that come in. And we've gotten much more sophisticated. We have money that was given us as a grant, and we have the ability now to keep our supplies on a regular basis and ordered, and socks, and the ability that way to reach out to people on a consistent basis.
So you mentioned sort of the philosophy that it started with, about being less about medical care and more about nursing care. Mm-hmm. Do you remember much else about why it was started, or Bev Nielsen's or others' ideas as it was initially started?
As I recall, and again, I'm part of the church, not part of the college, but that Bev had this idea, and it provided a spot where the nursing students who were finishing their Bachelor of Science degrees could come and get their community and public health part of that experience, as well as providing a resource to the community from Augsburg College. She knew someone from the church, and they made this agreement, and it worked well, and that's how it started. She engaged the nursing department at Augsburg, and they began to send students over on a regular basis.
Great. You mentioned that you began volunteering in 2001. What keeps you coming back?
I find that, first of all, I've gotten to know a lot of the community down here. People come on a regular basis for mental health care, for addiction care, for just support from the community. And I don't know, I worked early in my career in community health in the tobacco fields in North Carolina, and that I've always had a heart for people that were searching and trying to get into healthcare system, and helping them understand that and have that available. And so and also the staff that I work with here from Augsburg College have been tremendous. The head of the department of the Health Commons has changed several times, and each time has been somebody else, dedicated to the community and healthcare in downtown Minneapolis. And it's been a privilege to serve beside them and help provide this care to the community.
What's your favorite part of being part of the community at the Augsburg Central Health Commons?
I'll tell you a good story. I've done this for quite a while, and in the last 6 years, I've had some health issues of my own. And one of the members of the Health Commons, one of the community members that has had all kinds of wonderful things happen in their life, partially because of Bev Nielsen and then Ruth Innisfet and Linda Holt, has come to be a stable member of the community and lives in housing not too far from me in Section 8 housing. And when I got sick, I woke up one morning, it was during the summer, there she was in my front yard. She rode her bike every day to my home to garden for my husband and I. And I just thought, oh my goodness, because it was a dedicated effort on her part, to be able to get there. And it just was like, sometimes we don't see a lot of wonderful success stories. Sometimes we see people that do better than they did, but this lady has just been a miracle. And it really touched my heart to have somebody do that back for me. I'm not used to that.
It's a really beautiful story.
Yeah, I know. It was just amazing.
Speaking of, how do you develop relationships with people who come into the Health Commons space?
Well, you have to have a sense of, I feel like you have to have a sense of not being rushed, of engaging them just many times, or several times that they come in on a very open and beginning status of, hey, hi, what's your day like today? I try not to ask, how are you? Because obviously they're seeking our services. Their days probably aren't terrific. But what's going to happen next? Do you have somewhere to go for lunch? Just those beginning questions. Knowing their names. Getting to know their names and having them know mine. And then as time goes along, trying to make a scenario where they can sit down and you can actually have a little bit lengthier discussion with them and begin to know them better. Some people it's easier with than others. Some it takes just 1 or 2 visits and you're right there with them. On others it will take a year or 2 before you make some kind of little bit of niche through that armor of trying to protect themselves, stay out of trouble.
How do you create a sense of hospitality in providing care?
Well, to be welcoming, to not be overly, what's the word I want? Overly cheerful or just to be a normal person, welcome them into this area of space, letting them know what services are available through you, letting them know with the little handbook that we have that talks about the services offered in the city of Minneapolis, where they can go to make sure they have 3 meals a day, hopefully where they can find shelter at night, where they can get health care, where they can get clothing, where, not all at once, but just moving along with them at their own pace, so that they know that they're welcomed and they know that, when they come in the door, I know who that nurse is. I can, ask her questions. The hospitality of having hot coffee or hot tea around, come sit down, get your feet soaked. And while you're working on their feet or talking to them, having a chance to sometimes talk about sports, sometimes talk about books, sometimes talk about, a variety of issues on a daily basis, something which they don't get a lot of. People don't talk to them with a normal agenda. It's often, who are you, why are you here, what do you want, where are you going, and not just treating them as a regular person who has joys in their days sometimes and negative things other times.
How do you acknowledge the needs of people who come into the Health Commons?
Well, for myself, first I listen. And then I try to repeat back to them, I hear you saying you're hungry. I hear you saying you need a shower. I hear you saying you can't get your Medicaid. Repeating back to them and then trying to get some priority of the needs. And then we've made a lot of phone calls. There's been times that we have helped people get to their appointments. If you're homeless and you need a colonoscopy, you have to have a driver. They won't do it and let you get on a bus, or they won't allow you into the hospital for care without somebody to discharge you to. And so providing, occasionally we can't do that all the time, but the people to be able to help with that or to do that. Nice to have the church surrounding this Health Commons, the church itself, because by us is clothing closet and people with cell phones from the city giving out cell phones, people that help with job searches, people with mental health care. We can make referrals to that or walk with that person in there, because sometimes there's a fear of approaching somebody else.
What are some of the strengths that you see in the people who visit the Health Commons?
Oh, they're mighty and resilient considering what's happened. Strengths, at Christmas you'll hear, as people are waiting in the line to get to the clothes closet, you'll hear them burst into song. They'll be singing Christmas carols, or you'll overhear somebody say, well, I have 2 bus tokens here, take one of mine. They're very generous for the most part with each other. It's been very rarely that I've seen violence. We do have a full-time security staff, but that's very rare. We have a mixture of people from all races, all religions, all backgrounds, and they may choose not to engage with some people, but they'll come down and be part of the community. I forgot what you said the question was.
The question was about strengths.
Strengths. The strengths in the community, that they'll take the time to look for help, that they want to support their children. Sometimes that takes a long time. How do I get to the AA group? I want to look at my addictions and stop that. Some of them come with strengths from their parents. We had one mentally ill man who saw visions and had problems with voices that he heard. And since he was in his 30s, since he'd been a child, his mother, who couldn't afford health care for him for mental health, had said repeatedly and over and over and over to him, any voice that you hear, do not do what they say. Any voice that you hear, do not do what they say. And he repeated that in his mind over and over and over and over. And that's how he dealt with it until he could actually get into the mental health system. To me, those are the kinds of strengths where people look for what they have to help them succeed.
I think you spoke to this a little bit, but how do you accompany people on their journey of health at the Health Commons?
Well, by being there, for me, I'm in the church a lot for other purposes, and if I see them in the hallway or somewhere, I always try to take the time to stop and talk to them and call them by name and introduce them to somebody else, so that they don't see themselves as just part of the restoration community, that they see themselves as a full human, that just like you would if I had a friend with me or somebody else with me, introduced other people in the community and that, and not say, oh, this is so-and-so, they come to the Restoration Center, this is so-and-so and they're visiting our church today, that kind of thing. Reach out to people that way. Or downtown, sometimes I'll see people downtown, on the corner or collecting money, and I stop and greet them and say hi and try to call them by name and remind them to come back over to the Restoration Center, that I look forward to seeing them again. Other people I only see occasionally, but always that they're welcome and that they're a part of the community.
What is something you think could improve at Health Commons?
What could improve the Health Commons? Considering the amount of money, the hygiene items we give out, and the time we have to sit down with people and talk about their care, the nice thing will be when we have our new space is to have a private area again where we can take people aside and talk to them about specific health concerns. Do a little more in-depth teaching, maybe about diabetes or high blood pressure, or how when you're out and about and eating eating 3 times a day at a place that offers meals, how to manage your health, because often those meals aren't the kind of meals that are best in your health condition. Balance that with enough staff to do that, enough students, enough money to buy the items we need to hand out to people. But I'm fully invested in how this community is run, and don't see that it needs to have a lot of dramatic changes made in it. So,
I apologize.
apologize. I gotta get my stuff.
Is there any other hopes that you have for the new space?
Hopes for the new space. Just that that people will feel welcome and comfortable there, and that the whole community that serves the Restoration Center will have the clothing and the space and the extra services to have for people, as well as what the Health Commons can contribute. I think it will only increase our ability to work well and more efficiently, and I don't know until it's open and gets going exactly what all that will look like, but I think it will be positive. Given
that you're not sure how it might look in a few months when we move back, this question might be tough, but what do you think the Health Commons should be like 20 years from now?
Well, I hope it doesn't become institutionalized, that it continues to be a place where people feel safe and come in and can ask any question they want to and be served. That Augsburg College and the church will continue to have a good relationship, so that the professors are able to come over and invest their time and their resources and work with the students over here. The gift of students is amazing, because the chance to introduce them to this part of the community and the needs that are so deep may be the first and only time in their nursing education that they actually see that on site, and it may tug at their hearts and settle into their minds, so that no matter what situation they're dealing with as nurses, they'll look at that person maybe in the hospital and realize this is somebody from the community, and they're going to be discharged not home but back to the streets. And what does that mean, and what's available, and what resources can they draw? And I think that I'd like in 20 years to see that part of it grow, and like I said, that it continues to be available. It's really easy to cut services, and we hope that won't happen. I think it's good for the community too, although we serve everybody, and we let the students see we're serving people of all different ethnic backgrounds, all different religious backgrounds, all different need backgrounds, and that the acceptance of meeting someone where they are and listening to what they have to say is really important. And they don't often get time to sit and listen at the hospital.
What should nurses know when taking care of people who may be experiencing homelessness or who are marginally housed?
It's helpful to know what's available in the community, what the resources are, and Minneapolis and St. Paul has been very good about that with the booklet that they produce about living on the streets. And they can show that those are available, or that somebody can get to a computer to find the services that they need. Say that again, my question.
It was, what should nurses know?
They need to know what resources are available. They need to not be afraid of dealing with segment of the community, because some people are very fearful that something will happen to them, that they feel comfortable, that they have the chance to sit down and talk one-on-one and hear people's stories, that they learn to not be judgmental, that a variety of things along like that line that allows the person that comes in that's already homeless or living marginally and feel embarrassed to begin with, or don't want to ask questions or for more, or afraid to, letting them feel the safeness in this community and the places where they can go to get the help that they need.
What are some of the challenges you have heard most regarding people's ability to access healthcare?
What have I heard? access health care. Well, money, insurance, feeling judged when they go into an emergency room, medication, trying to keep their medication on a regular basis, things, dressing changes, physical therapy, all of that just doesn't feel available to people in the streets. And again, that comes from a basis of no money to pay for the service. Dental care is a big problem.
What are other typical health concerns you might encounter when you're caring for participants of the Health Commons?
Well, I think I mentioned that earlier, like just a routine medical care. There wouldn't be routine physicals. There wouldn't be probably the follow-through with the same doctors, because often their care is either urgent care or emergency room care. The inability to follow through with therapies that are needed, like mental health counseling or addiction groups or diabetic care, that what middle class Americans know as a fairly secure healthcare system just isn't available to these people. And even if they do have some help from the state, it's difficult to get appointments. And like I said, difficult to keep the same providers, difficult to get the transportation to get to the appointments, difficult to not have your medication stolen out of your backpack while you're sleeping at night in a shelter, trying to raise your children and get their vaccines and follow through on health care at a timely situation is difficult. So, lots of things. Yeah.
I have one more question. I'm just personally curious. You mentioned that, using a nursing model here may be better. It's less intimidating. It's not institutionalized medical care. In what other ways might nursing care be an appropriate fit for this context or beneficial? I want to know what values of nursing you think are most embedded here.
Well, there's part of our community that is afraid of healthcare and has never had any legitimate resources from healthcare. So they just totally avoid it. What a nursing model does is allow not a diagnosis or not the dispensing of the medication or not the orders to follow through on physical care, but that first step to say, come in. You are a whole person. We recognize you as that. We welcome you. Tell us your story. Tell us your story and let us work with you. Noisy here. Work with you to set up a plan of beginning to develop some kind of health resources for you. Now, in some cases, that's more urgent than others. Let me walk with you. Let me listen. Let me offer these suggestions to help your swollen legs or, getting your legs up at night or where you can go to get a shower because you have sores that are a problem. Just beginning to say, come in, we care about you. You're loved somewhere, you're cared about somewhere, and as they begin to accept that, then you can broaden out into where you send them or go or where they might want to be. If they walk directly into a medical model, it's, to me, a diagnosis, a list of things that they have to do, to get better, and it doesn't really have time or the ability to incorporate all their barriers. It's the barriers are great. We nurses tend to have at least the ability, and if that's our intent and the purpose of what we're doing is set that way, then we began to reach people that have not been reached.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you want to bring up, talk about, share with us?
Can't think of anything right now. Just have always appreciated the effort that Augsburg puts into the community. And again, this just being one segment of it, but that the Health Commons, working with the Restoration Center at Central Lutheran Church, has reached a part of the community in downtown Minneapolis that otherwise might well have never had any kind of contact and care.
Thank you for being with me.
You're welcome. I'm going to go home and say, why didn't I say this?